Imagine getting a letter from someone you mentored, except you didn't just get one letter, you got reports from household slaves, a formal letter from the group itself, intel from a visiting teacher, and 3 more people showing up at your door. Every single source is telling you something has gone wrong. That was Paul's situation with the church in Corinth, and the city itself helps explain why things got so messy. To understand why this church was such a mess, we need to understand the city it was planted in. Corinth sat on an isthmus, a narrow strip of land connecting mainland Greece to the Peloponnese Peninsula in the south. Every ship sailing between the Aegean Sea and the Western Mediterranean had a choice: take the long, dangerous route around the peninsula, or dock at Centrea on the eastern coast, haul cargo overland across the isthmus on a stone trackway, and reload on the western side at Lechaeon. All traffic funneled through Corinth, north-south by land, east-west by sea. The result? A wealthy, cosmopolitan, bustling commercial crossroads. Money, people, and ideas from across the Mediterranean poured through this city constantly. But the Corinth Paul knew wasn't the ancient Greek city, it was something else entirely. In 146 BCE, Rome destroyed Corinth for leading a Greek rebellion, leveled it. The city lay in ruins for roughly a century, abandoned. Then in 44 BCE, Julius Caesar refounded it as a Roman colony, settled with military veterans and freed persons from Rome. A colony, in Roman terms, meant a city founded and populated with Roman citizens, often to project Roman power into a region. This matters. Latin inscriptions dominated Corinth until around 130 CE. That's extraordinary in the Greek-speaking East. For nearly 2 centuries, this city on Greek soil operated with Roman language, Roman law, and Roman social structures. By the time Paul arrived around 50 CE, Corinth had been Roman for almost 100 years. Paul founded the Corinthian church himself, according to Acts 18, during an extended stay of about 18 months. By the time he writes 1 Corinthians from Ephesus across the Aegean, this church has had significant exposure to his teaching. It's not a newborn congregation. Think of it as adolescent, old enough to have internalized some instruction, young enough to be confused about how to apply it. And here's the critical structural detail. There was no single Corinthian church building. Multiple house churches met in different homes across the city, likely composed of different kinds of people, different patrons, different neighborhoods, different social dynamics under one theological umbrella. So Paul is sitting in Ephesus across the Aegean, and reports start coming in from multiple directions. 1 Corinthians isn't a response to one problem or one source. Paul is fielding intelligence from at least 4 distinct channels, each revealing different aspects of the church's troubles. Some of this information was solicited, he asked for it. Some was unsolicited. People showed up and told him things he hadn't asked about. That layered quality explains why the letter shifts topics and tone so dramatically from section to section. Start with Chloe's people, mentioned in chapter 1, verse 11. These are members of Chloe's household, likely slaves, free persons, or dependents, who reported quarrels and factions in the church. Chloe herself may or may not have been a believer. Paul never clarifies. What's striking is that even lower status members of the community had access to Paul's communication network. They could travel to Ephesus or send word. Then there's the letter from the Corinthians themselves. Chapter 7, verse 1. Now concerning the matters about which you wrote. From chapter 7 onward, Paul is answering their written questions about marriage, divorce, sexuality, and more. Third source, Apollos. He had come from Corinth and was now with Paul in Ephesus. Here's a key linguistic detail. In chapter 16, verse 12, Paul says, I urged Apollos to go back to you. The Greek verb is parakalesa, I urged, I encouraged. Compare that with how Paul talks about Timothy in chapter 4. I sent him to you. The verb for Timothy is epempsa, I dispatched. You send a subordinate, you urge a peer. Apollos could decline Paul's suggestion, and he did. This distinction matters because some Corinthians had rallied around Apollos as their preferred teacher, fueling the factionalism Paul addresses in chapters 1 through 4. Fourth, Stephanas, Fortunatus, and Achaicus, 3 men who visited Paul in Ephesus. Their names are sociological clues. Stephanas is Greek for crown. Fortunatus is Latin for lucky, a great name for a freed slave if you think about it. Achaicus means the one from Achaia, a regional identifier, a Greek name, a Latin name, and a regional name. Now, these 3 men are a microcosm of Corinth's cultural blend. And what these sources reveal is a church that doesn't look the way we might expect. 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 26, not many of you were wise by human standards, not many were powerful, not many were of noble birth. Those 3 terms, wise, powerful, noble, aren't generic compliments, they're Greek social status markers. Wise means formally educated, powerful means holding political office or influence, noble birth means aristocratic lineage. For decades, scholars read not many as essentially none. The whole church was poor, uneducated, enslaved. That fit a popular image of early Christianity as a movement of the oppressed. But not many doesn't mean none. It logically implies some were. The church included people across social strata, wealthy patrons who hosted house churches alongside slaves who served in those same households, educated members alongside illiterate ones. This social diversity, not uniform poverty, characterized the Corinthian congregation, and that diversity, more than anything else, likely generated the very conflicts Paul spends the entire letter addressing. Pull the threads together, Corinth's hybrid Roman-Greek identity, its commercial wealth, its multiple house churches, and its socially diverse membership all created a volatile mix. When we read 1 Corinthians and encounter disputes about leadership loyalties, lawsuits between believers, food offered to idols, and behavior at the Lord's Supper, these aren't random. They map onto tensions between people of different social status navigating shared community life. As you read this letter, keep asking who has power here, who doesn't, and how does that explain what's going wrong. That lens transforms 1 Corinthians from a list of ancient problems into a case study in how social diversity creates both richness and friction in any community.